Proceedings are resumed. I recognize the honorable member from the District of Easton.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I apologize for that flashback that I had, which reminded me of all the troubles that I have been through to advocate on behalf of my people commonsensical ideas. And I know how difficult that has been over the last 15 years. But I nevertheless have not stopped. I continue to do as I think is in the best interest of this country. Madam Speaker, I know in this instance that Marine unit may very well feel like they have been bombarded by criticism. But despite all that, Madam Speaker, I believe that that unit does a pretty good job under trying times. And much of it, no one knows about. Much of it, it's only that comes to light when there is some controversy surrounding it. I know the gentleman who must be a sergeant, inspector from Bodden Town. Sergeant, who is very capable. What his name is again? King Bush? Hugh. No, King. King. Hugh. I know. And I know you know water, because all he has ever done is been out on the beach in Bodden Town when he was young. So, you have to raise your hat to these Caymanians who try their best under trying times, Madam Speaker. And I've had a number of conversations with him about these boats, and I believe he has identified some faults in the boat, if I may. And I believe he needs to be listened to a little more. Most times these men have very good ideas on how to deal with situations, but nobody listens because that doesn't augur with their plans. But that is throughout the police force, I guess. But the best knowledge is local knowledge. You can learn everything elsewhere in the world, but when you try to dovetail it with the local requirements and needs, you need a little local knowledge. And if you don't have that, then you're inefficient. Madam Speaker, I hope that whatever comes out of this, that the Mullins family will one day get some closure. Not only will they be looking for closure on how it happened, but closure, I believe, more because I've heard the mom and the brother speak of closure about it will never happen again if they had to make their sacrifices. Then if there was any fault on the part of the state, then it will be closure for them, that it's been reviewed and it may never reoccur if we put provisions in place to correct it. And I'm not saying that there was any fault, Madam Speaker, on either side. Could be anything. But I too, Madam Speaker, thought that, like the Premier, that we would be looking for somebody closer to us, America. And I am a little surprised that we went to the Coast Guard and then the National Transportation and Safety Board. I'm a little surprised because, Madam Speaker, they are private investigators in America who are former members of Coast Guard, NTBS, TSB, and the likes, who could have done just as good a job. Things are cold now, and the delay doesn't bode well with people's memory. So I'm a little surprised we went to that distance. And whilst the Premier says that this gentleman is qualified, or the Deputy Governor speaks of his qualification, I shall leave my opinion of that until a later time. Because I hope that application of policies and procedures apply equally across the pond. And that should not change the outcome, or I hope it should not change the outcome of that review. Madam Speaker, again, my heart does go out to the families, and I hope that they can wait a little longer to find some peace, closure, and finality on the loss of their loved ones. I thank you, Madam Speaker.
Does any other member wish to speak? I recognize the fourth elected member from the District of Bordentown.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, before I begin, I'd also like to express my sincere sympathies for the family of those that are now presumed lost at sea. And I know I have had one or two conversations with them, and I do have a great appreciation for the sense of loss that they've experienced. Madam Speaker, I myself have had an experience on the ocean that has taught me to respect the ocean and the seas around us. I remember going out on a fishing trip with Mr. Frank Martinez, who's now passed on. And he and I used to take regular fishing trips out, especially in the South Sound. And there was one particular day that we were out, and we were out fishing, and we left early in the morning. Something that I learned that day is that around about 10, 11 o'clock in the morning, the weather pattern can change. And that is something I wasn't aware of until that day. But when we left, it was dead calm. Around about 10 o'clock, we were so busy catching fish and enjoying ourselves, we didn't notice that the seas had started to pick up. And we were out, Madam Speaker, in an 18-foot dusky. I don't know if anyone here is familiar with the dusky, but it's more appropriate for flat water, lakes and so forth, not really out in a rough sea. It's a very shallow boat. But as we were out there fishing and enjoying ourselves, and there's at one point that I remember, Madam Speaker, Mr. Frank looked up and looked around, took an assessment of the weather, and said to me, you know what, I think we better head back in. That was when the reality of it hit me, because when I did really take good stock of my surroundings, I realized the seas had picked up quite a bit, and significantly more than that little boat could handle. The one had a 50 horsepower engine on it. Now, I probably knew back then more about riding bicycles than driving a boat, but I had the benefit of having Mr. Frank with me, and I think everyone knows of his legacy on the water. He's another one of those Caymanians who spent his life at sea and that spent his boyhood fishing, and he's completely familiar with our waters and the weather conditions. So, Madam Speaker, in the time that it took for us to pull up the anchor and start to head back in, the seas had become so high that the boat was completely being swamped with seawater. I couldn't keep the bow up high enough to stop the water from coming into the boat. At that point, we had lost pretty much all of our tackle, life vests, flares, everything had washed overboard. And I remember sitting in that boat up to my knees in seawater. And until that day, Madam Speaker, I wasn't that much of a praying man. But I can guarantee you, when I finally got to shore, I was praying heavily. But what, Madam Speaker, what actually I think saved my life that day was having that Mr. Frank, my companion, on board that boat with me. Every wave that came towards that boat, every condition that changed, he was sitting there giving me instructions. I knew very little about driving that boat and getting that boat back to shore. But with that experience on board with me, I was able, through the grace of God and with his help, to save both of our lives that day. I know I resigned myself to the fact that if, Madam Speaker, if I had been out there by myself, I wouldn't be here today. And I understand the gravity and the reality of being in that situation, Madam Speaker. I can't explain the emotions and the anxiety that runs through your body when you realize the predicament that you're in. And I can only sympathize with those 5 who were on that boat that day. But I'm saying that to say this, Madam Speaker, we do have Caymanians with that expertise, with that knowledge. And in my discussions with members of the Marine Force and the police in general, that is one thing that has been highlighted to me, Madam Speaker, is that there have been cases where we have not put those with the requisite experience in charge of making certain life-saving decisions. And I just wanted to use that story to illustrate how serious it can be. Madam Speaker, I'd like to thank the Leader of the Opposition and, of course, my colleague, the first elected member from Bordentown, for bringing this motion to the fore. And I am aware through different media conversations and also conversations I've had with family members of those missing that the family did want to have this motion brought to the House. Madam Speaker, I would not have supported doing this in the absence of that knowledge. I take my responsibilities very seriously. But I was assured that the family wanted us to do this here today. As a matter of fact, I was assured that the family wanted this done much earlier. I certainly would not have supported coming here without that assurance, Madam Speaker. And I'm also concerned that up until the day that this motion was filed, there was no official announcement of an investigation. Now, it may have just been a coincidence, but I would like to think that this action here today played a role in helping that decision get made. Madam Speaker, the family have been begging for answers. The family of those lost. This is an extremely tragic event, and it is not one to be taken lightly, Madam Speaker. The persons lost on that boat are people's children, fathers, brothers, cousins, uncles, and friends. And I think we owe it to them to respectfully discuss the situation here. And somehow, I think through this debate, we've already seen evidence that it is proving useful. Madam Speaker, the family of those missing were promised answers. And I think as representatives, not politicians, but representatives, we owe them that much. I was aware early on that the family was visited by members of the government. And I commend the government for being involved at that early stage. And it is customary that as representatives, we visit our constituents and we show them our concern for their issues. I actually went to visit the family myself when I heard what had happened after speaking to a few of them on the phone. But the day that I chose to visit, they were actually at a meeting with the Commissioner of Police and being briefed. But at that point, I understood that members of cabinet had actually gone to visit the family. And so I decided, Madam Speaker, that in the interest of not politicizing this event, I would take a back seat and allow the government to do what it was doing and to assist the family. I didn't want my presence to inflame the situation or to give the impression that I was trying to disrupt what was happening. I wholeheartedly supported their efforts, and I took a back seat. And I may have taken the risk of appearing insensitive by stepping out of the way at that time. But I wanted to give the government the opportunity to do everything it could with no interference. But Madam Speaker, I was watching the news late last week, and I saw Mr. Mullings emotionally expressing his disappointment in the lack of action and in his opinion, lack of concern. And it really bothered me, Madam Speaker, when I turned on my television to see a Caymanian who depends on us as his representatives to assist his family in this time, pleading tearfully for assistance. And I did feel disappointed, Madam Speaker, that enough had not been done, in my opinion, up until that point. I know, Madam Speaker, I can appreciate that the government is busy. I've seen the number of bills that have come forward now for us to debate and deliberate within this honorable House. But I think it is of equal importance that when our constituents cry out to us to get involved, that we also do what we can within our power to assist. Madam Speaker, I keep hearing references to, the police not being under the remit of the elected government and that we're not responsible for policing. But in researching for my debate on this particular motion, I did come across a section of the police law that actually gives cabinet the ability to make regulations for the good order and government of the service, and for carrying into effect any of the purposes or provisions of this law. And it goes on to list numerous areas, Madam Speaker, where government can create regulations that will allow us to have more say in the governance and administration of the police. I don't believe, Madam Speaker, I may be wrong, that those regulations have been put into effect. But I would strongly urge the Cabinet to consider doing that with urgency. Because Section 146 of the police law actually gives Cabinet the ability to be more involved in our policing and to have more of a say. Madam Speaker, I do believe that the government has a responsibility in this. And when I say government, I mean all 18 of us. And I think it is completely appropriate for this motion to have been brought to the LA. It was requested by constituents, people who put us here. And I think that this is the appropriate place for us to discuss this issue. I know that opposition and independent members of this honorable House have been accused of playing politics with this issue, Madam Speaker. But when our people, our Caymanians, ask us to get involved, we have no alternative. We have no choice. This is where we come and do our work. And I think that ventilating these issues here in this honorable House is completely appropriate. This is where the people have their say. And if the people are not satisfied that the police service is functioning in the way that it should be, then I think it is our responsibility to bring those issues forward here. This is not plain politics, Madam Speaker. This is doing our job as far as I'm concerned. We are here to represent our people. Yeah, this is serious business. We're not playing politics. I wish I didn't have to do this, Madam Speaker. I wish the outcome of that day could have been far less tragic. It's not easy for us to get up in here and discuss this issue and, if need be, point fingers. But we do need answers. The family do need answers. And I dare say, Madam Speaker, when single-member constituencies are in place, you are going to see an increase in this sort of action. Because I can guarantee you, every single member that represents a single-member constituency is going to have to pay closer attention to their constituents. So, when Madam Speaker, when the opposition and independent members are accused of playing politics, I completely disagree with that. We were all elected here as equals, all of us. And none of us in here are more important than the other. And we all have a right to speak. We all have a right to air these concerns. If the standing orders didn't allow for us to request a special meeting, there might be an argument. But the standing orders do allow for it. Someone had the foresight and the vision to put that in there. And I hope it remains. Because, yes, I believe in majority rule. And I believe the government has the numbers. But in issues as important as this, there must be some mechanism in place for us to call special meetings and bring these very important issues to the fore. Madam Speaker, in researching what I was going to say for this particular debate, I came across a report of the session 2010-11 of the House of Commons titled Policing Large-Scale Disorder Lessons from the Disturbances of August 2011. And in that report, it was a report ordered by the House of Commons to discuss issues and concerns with policing. It wasn't in relation to a maritime incident. It was in relation to riots. But there is a mechanism there, and I think it is totally appropriate for Parliament, or in our case, the legislature, to have that avenue at our disposal. So, Madam Speaker, now that we've established that it is our business to raise this issue, and it is our business to ensure that the constituents' concerns are addressed, I must say that I am happy to see that an investigator has been appointed, and I have taken the time to examine his credentials, and I must say that I am pleased that someone with that experience and knowledge is being brought to the Cayman Islands to help investigate what actually happened in this incident. But what I would ask, Madam Speaker, is that the government consider not just making the final report public, but to also give us the terms of reference of the engagement prior to the investigation commencing. And I would ask that the investigation be given a reasonable timeline for conclusion, because this is not something that I think should be dragged on for years, but rather I think can be completed in a few short weeks. And also, Madam Speaker, I would respectfully ask that the final report be tabled here in the Legislative Assembly, and that the House be allowed to consider the contents of that report and be able to express our views and opinions on it. We should also, Madam Speaker, highlight what corrective actions are identified, and as a Parliament, we should be discussing and debating those recommendations with a view to putting them in place in short order. I would also hope that a local individual can be identified to work alongside this investigator, Madam Speaker. Not to be involved in the decision making or the actual investigation, but more as an observer at the very least, so that we can actually have some knowledge transfer from this individual who's only going to be here hopefully for a short time. Madam Speaker, my concerns primarily remain with the family members, and I know some of them are here with us today. And I want to give them my assurance that I will continue to be engaged in this discussion. And I'm going to do my best to be as helpful as possible and supportive as possible of this process. Because I know, Madam Speaker, that they all want closure. They all want answers. And if it was any of our family members, Madam Speaker, I think we would all want the same thing. Madam Speaker, there's been a lot of discussion in the media and otherwise about some of the differing accounts of what took place. And I won't go into detail very much on those because they will probably be part of the investigation. I don't want to say anything that will influence the outcome. But there are conflicting reports of what happened. And like my colleague before me, I really want to highlight the fact that we do have a helicopter here that is not fit for what I think its purpose should be when it comes to search and rescue operations. I I remain very concerned that we haven't at this stage taken actions to correct that situation, Madam Speaker. I know that the helicopter is very good at locating individuals on land and tracking individuals at night, but we do need, I think, to boost up the level of maritime assistance that the police can offer, especially to the individuals who are in distress at sea. And I do think it is time for us to really engage in a conversation of whether or not we need to implement a proper Coast Guard. As mentioned earlier, Madam Speaker, there are many, many officers who risk their lives on a daily basis to keep us safe and protected. And none of this is aimed at them. I wish to say that publicly, Madam Speaker. We are not on a witch hunt. No one called for anyone to resign or step down. We simply called for an investigation, but we wanted it in a timely manner. Madam Speaker, I can't bear to be away from my children for a day. So when you think about what this family, what these families are going through, it tears at your soul because I can completely empathize and sympathize with them. And we have to do everything within our power, Madam Speaker, to bring some closure to these families. Help them understand what went wrong. And at the end of the day, we don't know what the investigation will say. Nobody's prejudging. But timeliness, we need to get this done behind us so that this family can have some closure. This motion is simply asking for an independent inquiry. No one is being blamed, Madam Speaker. I had wished, though, Madam Speaker, that when this incident occurred, that instead of calling for an independent investigation, that the police leadership would have already launched their own investigation. I think that signals strong leadership when you're able to critique your own actions and learn from those mistakes. At this point, Madam Speaker, no one seems to know all the facts. The families don't know, the police don't know, the public do not know. And so we all do need to work together to draw this to a rapid conclusion. And I really don't understand why we had to end up coming here to demand those answers, Madam Speaker. That is what I think bothers me the most about this situation. It seems as if the situation was just going to be left to languish for a while and hopefully die down and go away. But we can't take that approach, Madam Speaker. We are legislators, but we are also representatives. And we have to demand better for our people. There's nothing wrong with that. We have many, many Caymanians in the police service who go beyond the call of duty. But there are questions, there are concerns. And the best way to deal with those, Madam Speaker, is to get them out in the open, discuss them, and resolve them. I don't intend to engage in any sort of political back and forth over this issue. It is too serious. This is not something that I am doing looking votes or political mileage. I simply want to know at the end of the day that I did everything in my power to bring some closure to this family and to prevent this happening in the future. So, Madam Speaker, with those few short words, I really want to ask the members of the government to please consider supporting this motion. By those, the indications of those that have already spoken, it seems that they will. And in the spirit of the 18 of us working together, Madam Speaker, let's move forward together to ensure that we continue to address these concerns for the betterment of our people. Thank you.
Does any other member wish to speak? Does any other member wish to speak? Recognize the fifth elected member from the District of Georgetown.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to give my support to this motion because, unlike what has been said in the press, that this is about politics. You just have to look around in the gallery and realize it is about people, people's lives, their feelings, the loss of their loved ones. And Madam Speaker, I too give my condolences to the family of the 5 missing persons. I've spoken to some of them and heard their concerns, Madam Speaker. And like the member from Town to my right, if you just sat and listened to them for 5 minutes, you would realize that this is their priority. It might not have been a priority for some of us in this house, the media, or whoever else echoed that the time would come, but the time was not then. The time was not last week. Madam Speaker, when we're playing with people's emotions and people's lives, we have to be able to empathize and put ourselves in their shoes. Priority, I understand, is relative, but who feels it knows it, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I'd like to publicly apologize to those families for the time it's taken to get to this point. We have to do better as elected representatives of this country when our people cry out. Madam Speaker, to say that this was not a priority was a slap in the face to everyone involved, but especially the families and everyone involved includes the Royal Cayman Islands Police Service, because I'm sure they also didn't want this hanging over their heads for as long as it has taken. Madam Speaker, we have to look in and amongst ourselves and ask some simple questions. If the question is, were people satisfied with a series of unfortunate events that occurred in this situation? And that answer is no. It's incumbent on us as leaders in this country, as representatives of the people, to ask those questions as soon as possible so that we can get clarity, so that we can have accountability, so that those involved on all sides of the coin can get closure. But most importantly, Madam Speaker, so that we can learn from some of these situations. We've been accused on this side of attacking the police. Madam Speaker, I want to state for the record emphatically, I would never be a part of any witch hunt, and I've said it publicly. But there are questions that need to be answered over this process. And each and every one of these people in this gallery need answers, including us, the legislators. Madam Speaker, there remain unanswered questions over the process, over timing, over accountability, over responses to the press and to all 18 members of this House, and also responses over why private helicopter operator could say that he could have gone out, but the police helicopter couldn't. Madam Speaker, those are all legitimate questions. And for us to ask them should not be dismissed as political grandstanding. Just like the members of the government can speak to the family, we can as well. And we can represent their true emotions. And sometimes it might take longer than we care to put something together where it's an inquiry. But by no means should we be unsympathetic and say that it's not a priority. Madam Speaker, in the next debate, I will talk about governance and management. So I need not further dilate at this moment. I do hope that in this investigation, the full report of the proceedings, all the questions, including why did the US government refuse to conduct a review? Why we went to them in the first place? The full report of the telephone calls, a tracking back to whatever the response plan is by the RCIPS, and whether or not that was followed by the book, and if not, a full list of the mitigating circumstances. And we've heard some of that this morning by what was read out by the first elected member from West Bay. Madam Speaker, they say every dark cloud has a silver lining. And in this instance, Madam Speaker, I would hope that the silver lining is that once we review what has occurred here, we come up with solutions to try to ensure that it never happens again. Madam Speaker, it's a great opportunity to start looking at our processes, start looking at the technology which people have presented to the government, even in the last year, in terms of electronic border control and being able to use radar and satellite and other things to pinpoint vessels at sea. To say that we don't question operational matters, Madam Speaker, is only half the statement. It is absolutely our responsibility to question them, A, when our constituents come to us because they've lost trust in the system. It's absolutely necessary to question them when we see that there was a breakdown in the process. And if, once we question them, inadequacies are found, then we should move swiftly to correct them, to reduce the probability of them happening in the same manner again. That is our role, I would dare say, Madam Speaker. To speak for those who can't speak for themselves, who might not be able to ask the right people or contact them. Madam Speaker, that's why we were elected by the people of this country. That is our primary role. Madam Speaker, as I look back over the series of these events, including the special meeting that we called for, I'm sometimes embarrassed to be a member of this honorable house, because you do see when politics takes over, and even if it's momentary, all of us tend to forget why we're here, and we react And that can't be good for anybody, Madam Speaker, but especially the people looking on and expecting results. Madam Speaker, I would suggest to my colleagues that all of us use this opportunity to reflect on our own actions and our ability to relate to our people. Use this as something that we can learn from as well. Because, Madam Speaker, this matter is not about sides. It's not about official opposition, independent opposition, government, who has the right to rule, who has the right to say, who has the majority, who doesn't. This should be a bipartisan matter, Madam Speaker. Every single one of us has constituents that have come to us and said something about this process, be it good, be it bad, but to use it politically, shame on all of us, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, we need to use this time as well to look at the governance and management of the Royal Cayman Islands Police Force, Police Service. And that's from top to bottom, Madam Speaker. And although I'll go into it in the next debate, we need to have a plan. Because if we don't have a national plan for the Royal Cayman Islands Police Service that we can hold people accountable to and processes when things like this occur, then we're all failing the people of the Cayman Islands. And I echo sentiments from the Honorable Member from East End in that we should also use this opportunity to look at the equipment that we have. Is it fit for purpose? Is it suitable for all eventualities, all events that could occur in the life of the service of the police? And if the answer is no, then we, again, as 18 members of this House, need to really focus on getting the police the equipment that they need in order to carry out their roles so that our people can have faith in the system and when these types of incidents occur. Because that's also what's important here, Madam Speaker. The police need to reflect the wishes of the people, the service they get from the police. And if the people find it wanting, then we need to address those areas because they need to feel that the service that they're getting is suitable. Madam Speaker, what this incident also shows us is that communication is key. We had clear, transparent, timely communication. A lot of this could have been avoided, Madam Speaker. And again, like the member member from Bordentown has said, the fourth elected member from Bordentown, this is not a time for playing politics. It's a time to do the right thing. And if we can't, at times like this, forget political differences, then I dare say we never will. Because this is far more than just about politics. We're not here to be friends with the police service, Madam Speaker. We're not here to take sides. We're here to be independent, arm's length observers and represent our people. No one that I spoke to on this side questions the competences of the police in general. No one sits and says, we want morale to be low in the Royal Cayman Islands Police Service. And so again, to be accused of things like that when you're trying to bring things to light, those are things that are very avoidable if we remember what we are here to do. Madam Speaker, I just want to ask everyone in this House a few questions before I close. What if this were our children? Would have been a priority then? Where's the empathy and the sympathy, even when we question some of the people involved? They're human beings, Madam Speaker. At the end of the day, the people expect more. They demand more. And they deserve more, Madam Speaker. Thank you.
Does any other member wish to speak? Does any other member wish to speak? Final call. Does any other member wish to speak? I recognize the Minister responsible for education.
Madam Speaker, before I go into any substantive debate or the few words that I want to contribute to this debate, I first want to express my deep, deep condolences to the families of the 5 people who were lost at sea. Madam Speaker, I've already done so privately, and now I'd like to do so publicly. Madam Speaker, I know both Gary and Edsel very well. As we went to school together, we're schoolmates, being virtually of the same age. I know the siblings of Gary. I know his mom. I know the aunts, the uncles, the cousins, and other family members of Edsel. I visited with both of the families, Madam Speaker, to express, as I said, my condolences, but to also hear and listen to their concerns as well. Madam Speaker, Gary was my friend. Edsel was my friend. And the missing of the 5 persons, even though I personally knew Gary and Edsel, but the missing of all 5 of those people have personally and deeply affected me. So I cannot imagine the grief. I cannot imagine the confusion, the emotions, the myriad of emotions that are being experienced by the respective family members. And Madam Speaker, as a mother, I simply cannot imagine what it is like, or what it would be like to lose your children. So, Madam Speaker, immediately upon hearing of the incidents, I broached the subject with the Premier and the government and expressed my concerns, my personal concerns about what was happening, what happened, what's going to happen, and expressed, as I said, my concerns about what I believe should happen. Even up until this very day, Madam Speaker, I have expressed similar concerns to the government. Madam Speaker, as the Premier stated in his contribution, that the government made it abundantly clear, and Madam Speaker, I certainly made it abundantly clear that there must be an investigation into this matter, and that it must be free, fair, objective, and thorough. And Madam Speaker, it must be publicly available, because, Madam Speaker, as was expressed by a number of people in this room, the family deserves answers. Madam Speaker, the public deserves answers. And we as legislators and representatives of the people we were elected to serve, Madam Speaker, we deserve answers as well. Madam Speaker, it is important for me as a legislator, as a representative of the people of the District of West Bay, and as a minister in the cabinet of the government of the people of this country, it is incumbent and it is important to help the people of this country understand our role and our respective responsibilities, Madam Speaker, because there is a lot that has been said, there is a lot of confusion about who is responsible, who can do what, how things should be done. And Madam Speaker, this certainly isn't about casting blame at this stage. We don't know. We haven't had any fulsome investigation, which has been promised by the Office of the Governor. And Madam Speaker, as a member of the government, I want the public to understand and appreciate what that means as it relates to calling on and determining any sort of actions to be taken by the RCIPS or not. Madam Speaker, the Constitution sets out very clearly the role, the responsibilities of the government, of the cabinet, of the governor, of the deputy governor. And Madam Speaker, it is very clear in a number of provisions, and I won't go into the technical analysis of the Constitution right now, Madam Speaker, given the nature of this particular debate. But I thought it is important for people to understand, especially if you're looking at sections 31, 32, 55, and 58 in particular, you will see it is very clear on its face that the governor has the responsibility, the sole responsibility as it relates to internal security, including the police. And even though we have a National Security Council, there is a specific carve out with respect to the responsibilities of that council as it relates to operational and staffing matters. And Madam Speaker, I only raise that to say because even in the debates today, Madam Speaker, there seems to be some confusion, either inadvertently or otherwise, as to what we can and what we can't do as legislators, as representatives, as the elected arm of this legislative assembly. I absolutely agree with the fifth elected member from the District of Georgetown when he said that we should be questioning and we should be asking questions where we feel either of our own volition or because questions have been put to us by our constituents. We absolutely should be raising those questions in the appropriate forums, given the nature of where we sit, so to speak, on the aisles, or what roles we play in this House and in the government as a whole. But we certainly, Madam Speaker, cannot dictate what happens. The Constitution makes that very, very clear, and I think it's important that the public understands our limitations to some degree in that regard when it comes to what can or can't be done when it comes to determining operational policy and matters related to the police, internal security in general. Now, Madam Speaker, raising the question about whether or not we as legislators should be more able to do that, or whether or not the government does or doesn't have that responsibility, that's a question, Madam Speaker, that goes far beyond this particular debate here. And I certainly don't want to take us down that tangent, and I certainly don't want to say that that may not be a question that shouldn't or should be asked, i.e. the nature of our constitutional arrangements. But Madam Speaker, we have what we have, and we are what we are, and we need to appreciate and respect the fact that we can do all that we can do within our power. And I want to echo that particular sentiment that was expressed by the fourth elected member from the District of Bodden Town. We must do all we can within our power to assist and to help to impact this process. But when it comes to making the final determination as to what that is, our power is limited. Not because of our desires to do more or otherwise. That's, Madam Speaker, in some instances, that is irrelevant. And I say that not to sound callous or to sound like a lawyer, but Madam Speaker, we as legislators, we have to help to educate the public about how we govern what our roles, what our responsibilities, what our abilities are. Because it is not good enough, Madam Speaker, to just talk about rhetoric, especially when we talk about issues such as this that is so emotional, that touches the lives of people that many of us in this room know and knew personally. Families' emotions are at stake. And when we talk about not making this political, I absolutely agree. This cannot be a political football where people try to have mileage as a result. And we cannot.
Order.
We cannot get to the point where people expect more than can be delivered. Madam Speaker, the one thing that I would like everybody listening, everybody in this galley, and everybody in the opposite side of the hall to understand and appreciate is that I, for one, certainly from the very beginning have implored and will continue to implore, and as I said, up until this day, have implored that there is a review of this process that will be conducted in a manner that is fully free, impartial, thorough, and one which is deserving of what we know these families are going through today, and that would help to provide some form of clarity, if not comfort, as to what went on. Because, Madam Speaker, as I said before, these families, this country, our people, deserve no less. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
We'll now take the luncheon break and reconvene at 2:15.